ahead and do an audio test, please?
I'm sorry.
Audio test.
Audio check. Audio check for me.
Yes, please.
Yeah, it looks like we actually have audio. So 1400, over to you, Dennis.
Are we on now?
We will pull up your slides now. Over to you, sir.
Okay, good afternoon, unless you're on the West Coast, and it still might be good morning. Dennis Blythe here, glad to be with you guys once again. Don't get to meet with you quite as often as I did before I retired, but having a chance to get back and meet with you a little bit is kind of a nice thing. I was talking to Jan Collins and telling her how great retirement was, and she said, you can't really be retired if you're still doing this. And I said, well, almost completely retired. So it's a good place to be, and it's a good time to get back with you guys for a little bit. I'm working at a bit of a disadvantage in that I'm not logged into the DCO, so I cannot see the list of names and list of questions and that sort of thing. If you do have questions, comments, or whatever, if you go ahead and post them on the DCO, the training team ladies are going to either relay them to me at the end of the session, or if there's questions that we need to do a little research on, we'll get those and we'll get answers back to you. But unfortunately, because of things just didn't work out very good about 15 minutes ago when I logged in, I'm not logged into the DCO at all, so I'm just looking at my slides. What I'll do is I'll just go through, and if you notice the slides are numbered, and I'll tell you what slide that I'm on at any given time. What we're going to talk about today is the shock rates, kind of what they are, where they come from, some of the things that are true and not true about it. There's a lot of misunderstanding. One of the things that was kind of a constant recurring theme of let's talk about, while I was at AFID, it was let's talk about IWINS, let's talk about ACES FM, let's talk about shock rates. So let's talk about shock rates once again for a little bit this afternoon. If you have occasion to want to get in touch with me after the fact, I've got the USAF, Pentagon, et cetera, .mil mail address. Because I am retired and I'm not wandering around from one place to another, the training team folks usually know how to get a hold of me. So if you need to, if you'd like to get a hold of me, that's a good way to do it. So please use that email address if you have need. There were a couple of questions, actually a total of 3, that I wanted to kind of mention before we get down into the presentation itself. One was a question from a lady from the logistics folks asking if we were going to be doing the labor rates they use. And we are not. If you went ahead and logged in, welcome and glad you're here. But what we're going to talk about exclusively is the shock rate that's used within the civil engineer community for cost accounting purposes, whether it be cost accounting for the cost of our projects or the cost accounting that becomes a component of the basis for, it really becomes the basis for our reimbursement program. So if you're online, great, glad you're here, but we're not going to be talking about the labor rates that you use directly at all. We did get a couple of questions, or really requests for more. One was a request for more guidance on how the new reimbursement process works. The comment was we seem to be stuck and information wasn't flowing, or at least not reliably. I bounced that right straight back to the training team ladies, and they're already working on trying to put a session together to talk about the very things that you asked for. They said they try to put it together as early as they can after the first of the year, but that's provided they can get it done that quickly. The new reimbursement process ready to go again?
Good to go? Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. Not sure what happened. I understand the whole world locked up. I've never had the whole world hang up on me before, but there we go. There's the first time. Sorry that happened. We'll pick up where we left off. We're talking about shop rates, kind of where they are, where they come from, some of the truths and things that are out there, and some of the things that people just believe to be true, but in fact really aren't. So what we're going to do is talk about the shop rates. Now, one of the people asked specifically from about the labor rates that they use at the centers, and we're going to be talking about that. And the answer is no. What we're going to be talking about is specific shop rates that's used by the civil engineer community in calculating its shop rate that's used for cost accounting purposes, both for the cost accounting for the projects that we do as well as the basis of our reimbursement. So if you're online from one of the centers, I think what Hanscom was where they asked the question from. More than welcome to have you. Glad you're here. But are we going to address the thing that specific things that you asked for in this session? The answer is no, we're not. Did have a couple of questions that were asked. Really, they were asked for more guidance or more training. One was for guidance on how the new reimbursement process works. The people said they seemed to be stuck in that their reimbursement information was not flowing reliably or was not flowing regularly. The training team is already working on putting a session together to talk about this. I took that email and shot it right back to them and said, this is something that's a very good topic. They're shooting to putting a session together just specifically for this right after the first of the year, if they can get it together that quickly. It's a real good suggestion, Kelly. Randy, I appreciate that, but the training team are going to try to design something to go right straight against that just as quickly as they can put it together. Very good question, good suggestion. We also had a question about can we get some more information on step-by-step actions required in ACEs and IWIMs to ensure the costs are being updated month to month. That was specifically what was written. They also had mentioned that a question of when can they use the rebuild function for the shop rates, and at what point does ACEs allow validation of the shop rate. All of those are really part and parcel of the Management 412 class that's handled at AFIT. About a third of that class is really dedicated to ACEs, IWIMs, next gen prep, and all that sort of thing. And Jackie Leskowitz, I'm sure, has made some changes to the 412 class since I left, but still, I'm going to ask the training team to get with Jackie. If you want to have me involved in it, fine, but get with Jackie and see how we'd like to address this. This is going to take a little more than one hour session to talk about these things. And Lisa, again, good questions, good suggestions, and then we'll get something directed back for the question you asked. The step-by-step action required of ACEs and IWIMs, as well as the rebuild function and the validation. All good stuff to do, and we'll have the team and Jackie to get together and figure out kind of what's the best way to go. Now, one thing that was also mentioned in that email was they had searched the Green Book, the old Green Book. I just want to take the moment here to give you caution. If you're still using the old Green Book that we used to pass out like a treasure, and we all figured we were finally part of the inside group if you had your own copy of the Green Book. That book, that printed version was superseded in 2009 with an online Green Book, and then that was recently updated rather dramatically here a couple of years ago. So the information in that old printed Green Book is pretty outdated, and where you might want to keep it as an heirloom, I don't know that I'd use it as a reference work right now. So be careful using that old material. Some of it's pretty dated and pretty out of date by now. So I'm up to my slide number 3, I guess. I said I was going to call out my slides, but didn't do it. Let's talk about the shop rates and talk about basically 4 things. What is the shop rate? There's always a lot of mystery about what it is. Like it's something a little bit cosmic, and it's really not. It's just the result of a math problem, a fairly simple math problem. But one of the things that it's important for us to look at is what are the components of the shop rate, because if you're having problems with your shop rate, it's not accurate or it's not good or it doesn't seem to be right to you, shop rate are correct. Somebody's got an open mic, so please be careful with that. That's always a challenge when we get a lot of people on, making sure the mics are closed. How does it work? We talk about shop rates like each individual shop has its own rate, and it doesn't. But kind of how does it work and what's really there and what's not, and we'll talk about that for a couple of minutes as well. Then there's some legends that are out there, and some of them are true and some of them are not. One of them that's my favorite, if we were all sitting in a group here together, if I said, how many of you have ever heard somebody say something like, when you send your people out to do the work at my place, only send military. Don't send even those high-priced civilians. Only send military because we know military labor is free. Well, that's something that technically it's the military labor component of the shop rate sometimes is free, is discounted, is not charged. But the idea that it's going to change whether the customer pays a lesser amount or a greater amount, it's not going to change it at all, and we're going to explain why. So let's go to slide number 4 and say, the shop rates, what is it? What are the shop rates? What are they all about? And the shop rate is really nothing more than $1 per direct hour value that we're going to use for a number of purposes for things that are going to wind up accumulating our costs for our actual time accounting work centers. If you go to slide 5, it's just highlights the $1 per direct value and turn red, because all the shop rate is a math problem, and it's a very basic math problem of its fraction. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't take a lot of work, and there's a lot of moving parts in getting that basic math problem together, the dollar amount and the direct hour amount. But notice it's the $1 per direct hour, the dollar amount, what's the total cost divided by the direct hours, the actual hours that are put out on work order. And that's really all the shop rate really is. Now, coming from that, there's a lot of misgivings about the shop rate. If my shop rate's bigger than your shop rate, so I'm more important than you or whatever. And it's not really, doesn't work that way at all. If you're at a high cost of living area, your shop rate's probably going to be higher than someplace that's a low cost of living area. I work at Goodfellow Air Force Base, which is a very low cost of living area. Their shop rate would be one thing. Take it and compare it to the one at Andrews Air Force Base, and they won't match. And that's because of the location and the relative cost there. So all of it is the $1 per direct hour value for your location, and it doesn't need to be viewed as anything more cosmic than that. Now, as said in bullet 2 there on that slide number 5, shop rates are no longer computed by IWINS. For those of us that's been around a while, we've been saying, well, IWINS computes your shop rates, and the shop rates are now computed within ACES-FM. Just a thing for you to know, actually, IWINS does continue to compute your shop rate. But whenever they brought ACES-FM into being, they found that it would be easier to mask that IWINS shop rate than it was to take all the components out. Because once they started pulling the wires out of IWINS, they were disconnecting things they didn't want disconnected. So what they really did was they masked the IWINS computed shop rate, and the only thing that you can see, the only thing that you can access to, is the one that's computed in ACES-FM. So that makes IWINS and ACES-FM a parallel and mutually supporting program. The data that is accumulated in IWINS is fed to ACES-FM, that then looks at the data that you put into ACES-FM, does the calculation, feeds it back out, and updates your work orders. So they're parallel and mutually supporting programs, IWINS and ACES-FM. So go into slide number 6. Where do the shop rates come from? What are the components? What's the pieces to the pie? There's several. I've got them listed here as 7 components. That's the way I've traditionally looked at it. Talking to Jen, again, actually there's really only 6 the way they work now these days, but I still tend to think of it as 7 components. And the first one's the military labor, which is all the folks that are wearing a uniform. If you think about the cost of the military, really the benefits portion of the military is all the same. How many days leave does an E1 get? 30 days. How many days leave does the Chief Staff of the Air Force get? 30 days. Right now, the Chief Staff of the Air Force's cost is going to be a lot higher, but the basic packages are pretty standard. Traditionally, we thought about the civilian labor component as being two pieces, the civilian labor and the civilian benefits. But the civilian benefits really are included in the whole pay package now that comes from DQ. They no longer break that down into two separate things as civilian labor and civilian benefits. When they came up with all the EEICs and the pay computation, it'd be a nightmare to try to keep track of all of that. So how I've always traditionally thought of the civilian part as the civilian labor being the hourly rate and the benefits being that benefit package, I still kind of think of it in my old mind that way, but in reality, what they do is they use the total cost of all the RCCs to include the benefits, and it's all brought over basically as one package. They don't care whose name's attached to it, they just want to know the costs. Now, when looking at the costs for local national labor, we need to be sure that the benefits are included in the pay tables that are there, because there's not a separate benefit line for that. So where I've traditionally viewed the civilian labor and the civilian benefits as separate items, as I have here, I guess I probably will discontinue doing that in the future. In reality, the civilian benefits are completely included in the pay transactions that come across DQ, and are no longer break that down with since there's so many EEICs to deal with. So keep that in mind while you're looking at the shock rate components. You have the military labor, you have the civilian labor. I also asked Jan Collins, who's been a good friend for a lot of time, a lot of years, about the vehicle operations cost. Jan's the one who has her hand in the creation of NextGen IT. And there was some question about whether to have the vehicle operations cost as part of the shop rates, in the future, or whether they would be deleted. Evidently the current and I assume final decision is that the vehicle operations cost will be part of your shop rates in NextGen. So some care and feeding for that. I know the updating of vehicle operations costs a lot of times is, what did we do last year? Okay, put 5% on top of that. I suppose you could probably get away with updating your vehicle operations cost that way for a year or two. But at some point, doing a real scrub, sitting down with the vehicle control people and saying, what are the real costs, probably is a smart thing to do. And all the other things that you have to do as well, that's probably one more. So vehicle operations costs are part of the shop rate for that we're using now, and they will continue to be so in the future when you go to NextGen IT. Now, I put a note on the slide for indirect materials, and that's one of my fun things that I've always kind of found interesting to look at. I put the note there that Jan reminded me or Rick told me that the indirect materials have a new EEIC 61904. They're all gathered together. If you haven't updated your documents to reflect that, you need to, because it was designed to not only give you a better handle of tracking your indirect materials as it relates to your shop rates or just relates to your costs, but also it helps position you for NextGen implementation. Over the number of years, there's some folks that have used part of IWIMS. They've turned off part of IWIMS. They say we no longer do this, we no longer do that. Last iteration I heard of the next generation implementation is that that county option, that individual, we're going to do this and we're not going to do that, is really not going to be nearly so much possible. So getting your documents together on 61904 is important not only for the current computation of your shop rate, but also getting you ready for when we do step across over into NextGen IT. Indirect materials, what are they? It's all the stuff that's not the direct materials. I've traditionally talked about replacing a door as the project. What's the direct material? It's the door. What's the indirect material? All the other stuff. Nuts, bolts, screws, nails, caulking compound, insulation, whatever it might be, all the other things that may be out of the shop. Local national labor, part of the shop rate. Local national labor is unique in each country. With the status of force agreement, they have a structure on how the local national labor is configured. Some has a certain number of pay grades and a certain number of steps. Other nations have a different number of pay grades and a different number of steps. So local national labor needs to be looked at and included if you have that at your site. And then one of my favorites is the incremental direct because it's technically not incremental or direct. It's really the civilian overhead for selected shops, especially in your ops slide. So those are the places where your shop rates come from. Each one of those components are brought together and are the moving parts that become the cost part of the shop rate. Now you take the total cost, then you take the total direct hours and divide. And then you come up with a shop rate. In fact, NextGen will do that for you. HSFM and formerly in Highlands will do that for you. So it's not something that you have to sit down and do with your own calculator. In fact, it would be very, very challenging to do it with a calculator. But knowing what the component parts are. Because if you have a problem with your shop rate, to go back to one of the questions that was asked by Lisa is, kind of how do I do that? Is you go back and you have to rebuild sometimes, but you got to know what the components are. I'll tell you a story on myself here in a couple of minutes about how we failed to understand one of the components of the shop rate and kind of got ourselves in some trouble. And it was fortunate we had a good ops chief that got some fairly new CP resources, people out of trouble. Military labor, civilian labor, vehicles, indirect materials, local national labor, and incremental direct are the things that make up your shop rate. I like to always remind people of the direct and indirect materials one more time. For the direct materials, it's the thing, whatever it is you're doing, is charged specifically on to an individual work order. If you're doing the traditional thing that I said, let's fix a broken door, the direct material is the door. Is the direct material, is that door part of your shop rate? The answer is no. Yeah, because you've got a requirement for a door. You bought a door, it cost $400, and so then you put $400 on the work order, and that's all it is. I didn't say I would discuss slide 7, but that's where I am. If you had followed me there, sorry about that. So the direct material is the item that's charged directly to the work order for whatever you're doing. The indirect materials are kept in the shop, the truck, the tool belt, wherever it is they're kept. They should be kept in the warehouse. But those are the things like the shop stock and et cetera, those things that are listed in those Quad 0 work orders that are listed in front of you. Those are the things that now will be, many will be accumulated under 61904 in order to make it easier for you to keep track of, to make it easier for you to understand, to get your arms around, to know how to put those together. And those are the indirect materials that are brought to bear. Are indirect materials part of your shop rate? Yes, they are. Are direct materials part of your shop rate? No, it is not. In fact, whenever I was at one of the very items that we asked on the test, it says, here's the items, which one is not part of your shop rate? And if you see direct materials there, it's not part of the shop rate. It's charged directly onto a work order. So moving on to number 8 rather. Shop rate categories. We talk about shop rates as if each individual has its own rate. Of course, they do not. Each shop does not have its own shop rate. What happens is we have shop rate categories. The shop rates are accumulated, or the shops rather, are accumulated in similar function, similar cost factor, and they're lumped together. So what we really have is not a shop rate for the carpenter shop and another shop rate for HVAC. We have a shop rate for a category A, and category A is listed, or category B or category C is listed of all the component shops that are there. Each category will have its own unique shop rate, and depending on how many categories you have at your base, some of you have several, and some of you only have 1 or 2. That's fine. Either way, your leadership wants to do that. But the shop rate categories are really where the shop rates occur. The common categories that we've seen over time would be engineering, construction, environmental, and the ones that are listed here, and I don't have to read them off to you. But the ones that you see more often than not are engineering and construction and general O&M. We currently have been challenged to have our engineers keep time for a certain number of functions, so it's difficult to get to do that, but they're supposed to. And then the general O&M is the things that go on in our ops slide. So those are the ones that you often. There could be more than this, and some places have traditionally had more than this. When we had Bowling Air Force Base, still as an Air Force Base, there was one shop that was a CE shop that was completely and totally contained within the Defense Intelligence Agency, because that's where the Defense Intelligence Agency's big building is. And the Defense Intelligence Agency said, we need a shop, a CE shop embedded within our organization, because we have to have those people all have top secret clearances, because you have to have a top secret clearance to walk around in the building, or you have to be escorted for everything you're here. So you could have some unique functions at big bases with big military facilities. You might have medical facility maintenance function. Not too many of those, but there have been some. You could have some in places like in PACAF, where they have some military family housing organizations that are pretty breathtaking, and so traditionally engineering and construction, general O&M are the basics, and some of you may choose to have more. Going to slide number 9, we'll look at how the shock rate is actually calculated and how it works. It really is a computation of the cost for the month, but it also goes back and looks at a 12-month historical data. So you have all the component costs, you have all the direct hours, you do the math, you come up with the cost. What you actually have is an average of averages, because it's the average of the last 12 months. You'll have a computed shock rate, which is the computed shock rate for the last month, and then you'll have an applied shock rate, which is that average of averages. The reason they did that originally was to basically smooth the changes out so that they wouldn't be terribly radical. We not only are trying to keep the shock rate fairly stable and good for our planning purposes, but in a certain sense, even more so for our reimbursable customers. If you took your shock rate and changed it from, say, $50 an hour to $70 an hour in 1 month, go over to your services organization and watch those people pass out, because they're trying to plan a payment schedule just like we're trying to plan an accounts receipt schedule. So it's an average of averages, and that's to smooth out the changes that are there. Of course, a change of that much in the shock rate in one particular month would be pretty dramatic and pretty uncommon. There's additional in that there's a 10% tolerance is all that the shock rate will be allowed to change, excuse me, in any given month. And the 10% tolerance, let's go back to that ridiculous thing. If you have, let's say, a $50 shock rate, and the next month it's calculated at 70, that would be absolutely unheard of, but let's say that it were. All that the system would allow is that the shock rate would go up 10%. So if you had a $50 shock rate, it could go no higher than $55. Even that probably is going to give your services folks heartburn. But there again, that's to keep the system as smooth as possible, while still letting it reflect as close as possible the actual cost that you have. Now, let me tell you, just focus on that 10% tolerance and remind folks that that's not a goal. That's a limit. When I was a brand new resources flight chief back in the days when we had resources flight chief, we looked at the calculated shock rate, and it had gone down by 7%. And I was brand new to CE, and the funds managers, none of them had been in CE longer than 90 days. Some had been in FM before, but they had never been in CE, so we were all pretty new with the CE processes. So we knew that the shock rate couldn't go down more than 10%. We looked at it, it went down 7%. That was back when you actually pushed the validation button. We said not exceeding 10%, good to go. We pushed the button and went to the next month. The next month, it also went down something like 7-8%. The next month after that, it did it again. And what we were looking at was each individual month as if it stood alone. After the third month, my ops chief came in and said, Dennis, can you look at my shock rate? Because the way it's going down 7 and 8% every month, I'm going to be the cheapest state in Texas sooner or later. And then we went back and we looked at the shock rate. The shock rate, shock components had been turned off at the end of the year for end of year closeout, just like we do every year. And it stays turned
is that to get everything finished up, and then they turn back the components, all the components back onto the shop rate. Well, they turn those components off individually, and they turn it back on individually. And when our iWinds controller turned it back on after the closeout was completed, he forgot one of them. And that's when the civilian benefits were handled separately, and he forgot to turn the civilian benefits back on. So over time, the civilian benefits were not being added into the shock rate. So I say that and kind of admit to my own misdeed back 15 years ago, because we didn't understand that 10% was a tolerance, it wasn't a goal. And we need to be looking more strategically than we were. We were just looking 30 days at a time, and we weren't looking at a longer trend. The shock rate calculation is a 12-month average of averages with a 10% tolerance change that says it can go up or down with 10% in any given month. So looking at slide number 10, see how we're doing for time here. Not too bad. Actually, we're a little bit in front of the power curve for time. Let's just talk about some of the things that are true and sometimes not true when it deals with the applying of our shock rates. When we're looking at our shock rates, not all of our organizations are charged. Sometimes the shock rate is supporting our cost accounting so that we know what the costs are, but does it wind up being part of some kind of a reimbursement or such? And the answer is no. If we go back into replace a door, and we replace a door for your mission support group commander, at the end of the completion of that mission support group commander's new door, he or she is probably going to say thank you, and that's it. Because that's one of those things that we in CE are funded to do. But if you do exactly that same work, exactly that same door, and do it for the medical group commander, different story. Now it not only tells us how much the project costs, but it tells us how much we're going to ask that medical group commander, to reimburse for the work. So not all organizations are charged, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's an unimportant activity, because it still is a cost accounting, so that allows us to know how much does it take to replace a door, replace a window, repair a carpet, repair an HVAC. We've done it before. We can look at historical data and see that, as well as it allows us to look at the total cost of our effort. We also get a lot of hand-wringing about overtime. Folks get nervous about overtime because they know it can be expensive, and they say, I don't have the money to pay for overtime. Overtime does not directly charge against an individual work order. It can be if the customer agrees to it and says, yeah, I don't care, I want it done and I need it done right now, and I'll pay the overtime if you have to. But normally the overtime is charged as an overhead cost. It means that overtime is going to be spread out over all the work orders for the month. So when folks are wringing their hands about work that they need CE to do, or the cost of the work they need CE to do, overtime is charged as an overhead cost unless that customer agrees beforehand to pay the overtime, and they can. And we can code that into iWinds to make that happen. One of the things we would tell your superintendents whenever they come to the 570 class is don't let your customers drive how you get the work done. For the ops chief needs to get a certain body of work done, and if the ops chief chooses to do it with overtime, that shouldn't be particularly influenced by the customer. That they need to get it done because they've got something else that they have coming up on the schedule in a couple of days. They need to get this done now. So overtime does not directly charge a work order. It really charges as an overhead cost. The one that people really misunderstand, though, and the place where we get a lot of hand-wringing, is it does not matter who comes to do the work as to whether people will have a discounted shock rate or not. This is that part where people will sometimes say, and I've at 9 years, almost 10 years of AFIT, I never had someone not say that they had, yeah, I've heard somebody say that before, and what they say is, don't send any of your high-priced civilians to work here. Only send military rather, because I know military labor is free. Well, there is a DOD 7014R that says, if your customer is a fellow DOD agency, do not charge for military labor. If my memory serves me correct, and it may not, it's in volume 11, I believe, chapter 1. So if that's not right, just do a word search for it and search for shop rates, and it'll find it. What it says is if your DOD customer is a fellow, if your customer is a fellow DOD agency, do not charge for military labor. So what is the truth about this belief that people have? Don't send any of your high-priced civilians in military because I know military labor is free. What they're thinking of is who comes to do the work. It does not matter who comes to do the work. If you go to the next slide, number 11, and go back to those military components, it does not matter who comes to do the work, because what the thing says in DOD 7014R is if the customer is a fellow DOD agency, do not charge for military labor. So if we're going to go to do work for a fellow DOD agency and the shop rate is going to be computed for that job, it's going to include incremental direct, local national labor if you have it, direct materials, vehicle operations, the civilian benefits and labor as one, and it's not going to charge for military labor because that's a fellow DOD agency. And I don't care who did the work. It doesn't matter who pounded the nails, turned the wrench, fixed the plumbing, or whatever it may be. But if they are not a fellow DOD agency, they're going to be charged for incremental direct and everything on this slide because of who did the work? No, because they're not entitled to a discount. For those of you who may have gone through Goodfellow Air Force Base, right behind Goodfellow Air Force Base, CE compound is a DOT track. It's a Department of Transportation track. And let's say that the Department of Transportation folks called over to CE and said, hey, can you send a plumber quick? We got a problem. Usually they don't, but they could. If we did that, and we went over and did some plumbing project for them for a couple of hours, what would they be charged? Incremental direct. We don't have local national labor, but they do have indirect materials, vehicle operation costs, civilian benefits, civilian labor, and military labor. If you did exactly the same work for, and they would be charged the full rate for everything. If you did exactly the same work for, say, the medical center now, that is a fellow DOD agency. Same person does exactly the same job, incremental direct all the way up the thing, except for when we get to the military labor, we're not going to charge that component. So it does not matter who you send to do the work. And I tell your superintendent that, and I tell your ops chiefs that, because let's say that you have maybe the most unique, one-of-a-kind piece of HVAC equipment in the Air Force on your base. Who needs to be trained to service that out of your HVAC shop? And the answer is all of them. And it's not whether they're wearing a uniform or not wearing a uniform, but it's all of them. And so just because somebody says, don't send your high-priced civilians, only send military because I know military labor is free, they know something, but they apply it incorrectly. It's not who does the work. It's if the customer is entitled to a discount, they get a discount because of who they are, not because of who you send to do the work. If you've got any questions about that, talk to Jackie. If Jackie wants to, or if you want to, send an email to. I would always say to the supers, whenever I have them in class, if we had 35 of them in class, which is normal the size that they would have, I'd say 2 or more of you will call me within the next 90 days because you're getting ready to have a knockdown drag out with somebody about that. Don't send me city high-priced civilians because we know military labor is free. It does not matter who you send to do the work. It matters whether the customer is entitled to a discount or not. I'm on slide 12 now. So, if you wanted to manipulate your shop rate, if you wanted to, how would you do it? Well, you would do it by either creating a flight that had all civilians or had all military. Why you would want to do that, I don't know. Almost never would it be something that you would even want to do, but if you wanted to manipulate your shop rate to be as low as possible to most of your customers, the way you do is create a shop and have only military in it. Because then you would have a military labor component that is sometimes not charged and a civilian labor component that's zero. wanted your shop rate to be as high as possible, how would you do it? You do the exactly reverse. You come up with a shop, create a shop, and have only surveillance in it. Now, that's the way to do it. Why you would want to, I haven't a clue. The only time that I've ever heard that it made any particular sense is when the folks at DIA did it. And they said we have to have everybody that comes to work here has to have TS clearance, and how many plumbers and carpenters have that. So give us civilians because they won't be rotating in and out on PCS orders so much. So that's the way you do it. Not by who you send to do the work, but by how you create the flight. Though I can't imagine why you would want to do that, but that's the way it would work. Your shop rates require a lot of care. Just before I retired, and I've been retired now just a little more than 4 months, somebody told me that their shop rate was $12. Come on, $12? If you have a $12 shop rate, I guarantee you do not have an accurate shop rate. Life is just not that good anymore. Their shop rates require a fair amount of care and feeding. This is something that if left to its own devices will tend to wander off on its own. It doesn't normally take a lot of time if you're going to, in a situation where you're going to have to do a rebuild or reconstruct your shop rate. It can be a little bit tedious, but it can be done. But they do require a lot of care. As you are getting ready for next gen, you need to get your shop rate back in order. They do need to be accurate for the transfer to the next gen for part of it, but also because it's the basis of your reimbursement program. And if you're charging $25 an hour for something that's costing you $70 an hour, you're not claiming the reimbursements you're entitled to, and that's technically a Anti-Deficiency Act violation. If by the same token you're charging $150 an hour for a shop rate when your costs are really only $75, you're taking money from somebody else that you really are not entitled to. So your shop rate must be accurate because you've got next gen facing you here in the foreseeable future, but it's also because it bumps you right up against the Anti-Deficiency Act, it bumps you up against the law. Loaning and borrowing can cause problems. You folks down in your ops flight are going to wind up sending people from one shop to another shop in order to get some things done. Is that something that they shouldn't do? Now they do it all the time. It's called good management. But if you have an endeavor that's going to cross shop rate categories, and there's a big difference in the category shop rate, if I go from my shop to your shop, and you have a low shop and I have a high shop rate, what I'm going to do is go infect your shop rate with mine, because it's not, but then I'm going to wind up having it attached to me personally. So when I come and work in your shop, I'm going to change your shop rate, and how long is that going to last? 12 months. It's going to be a declining impact, but it's going to be there, and you're going to have the I-wind sniffles. You're going to be infected with that for a total of 12 months. So if it's going to be a small, insignificant kind of thing, I tell the folks in the ops flight and the supers, if you're talking about something that they go down and help them for an hour, do it. That's called good management. But if you're talking about something that's going to be a significant effort, it's going to be several days, weeks, months in getting the project completed, they either need to change the individual being sent down to the new shop, just reassign them, or they need to change who owns that work order. So loaning and borrowing can cause problems. It's not a big concern for little short durations, but it can be a problem over time. There's a lot. There has been over time a belief that the shop rate, my shop rate's bigger than your shop rate, so I'm more important than you are. You don't want to go down that road because it's just whatever your shop rate is. Your shop rate is your shop rate for your base. And if you start looking at trying to jack up your shop rate for whatever particular reason, what you're going to wind up doing is hurting work approval. If you took your car down to have it worked on, what's one of the first things that you're going to ask them? What's wrong? How much is that going to cost? Well, that's the same kind of thing we almost want our customers to be looking at. And we want to know if there's a reasonable and fair and justifiable shop rate that's going to be charged. There was a good friend of mine, J.B. Buck, had a mechanic shop, and in the back of his shop, he had a sign that said shop rate. And I always thought it was kind of cute because he had shop rates. His shop rate was $50 an hour unless you watched, and it was $75 an hour. If you wanted help, it was $100 an hour. And so it's, the costs are the costs are the costs. a service providing business, so some people have to reimburse us for the cost of that work. So going back to the summary thing, kind of where are we, where we go for the last almost 50 minutes now. What are they? The shock rate is a ratio of the total costs against the total direct hours, and that's really all it is. The components, depending on how you look at it, there's either 6 or 7. Actually, there's 6. The way Jan kind of reordered that for me is we have military labor, we have civilian labor, we have vehicle costs, incremental direct, we have, oh gee, my mind has gone blank since I'm not looking at the slides, but there's a total of 6. So those are the components. If your shock rate is not accurate, if your shock rate is not reliable, if your shock rate hasn't changed in 3 years, you probably are going to have to go back and recalculate and re-examine each one of those components. I will use a name. I don't know if she's still in Germany, but she was when I retired. There is a person who I have seen rebuild a shock rate from scratch. Her name is Cindy Betfield. She did an absolutely marvelous job. She was in resources in Ramstein last time I heard. Whenever you do have to rebuild the shock rate, is it hard? No. Is it tedious? Yes. And for several days, we had Cindy back in the corner, and if you even mentioned her name, she'd almost hiss at you because she was so focused in trying to do this. So the components, if you're having trouble with your shock rate, that's what you're going to have to fix. Garbage in, garbage out. If your components are wrong, your shock rate is going to be wrong. How does it work? Well, it works against the individual shock rate categories. When we talk about this at AFIT, when we were talking in the 412 class, we would spend about 3.5 days talking just about all the vagaries of IWIMs and A through FM and all. So if you have further questions, talking to Jackie about the 412 curriculum, asking her to work with the training team or pull me in to help if you need me to. There's a lot more can be discussed about the shock rate. There are some legends. Some of them are true, but they're applied incorrectly. My favorite one is, don't send any of your high-priced civilians, send only military because we know military labor is free. That's a thing that is technically correct and applied incorrectly. It's not whether the person does the work is military or not. It's whether you, the customer, are entitled to a discount or not. If you are a fellow DoD agency, you are. If you're not a fellow DoD agency, you're not. And it does not matter who goes to work. So the last slide, the summary. If your shock rates are broken, I guarantee your reimbursements are broken. I once had a squadron commander call me and say, Dennis, can IWIMS allow us when IWIMS is still calculating the shock rate? Well, IWIMS allow me to change the shock rate. And I said, well, yes, it will. Why would you want to do that? And he said, well, we're having a hard time meeting such and such, and we need to increase our shock rate or we're going to run out of money. Well, I said, you can do that, but if you do it, it's against the law. Your shock rate has to be accurate, because if your shock rate is too high, you have a broken reimbursement program. If it's too low, you have a broken reimbursement program, and you're looking very, very close at an ADA. Broken shock rates equals broken reimbursements. Broken reimbursements is broken budget. Back in the day, when we really had about as much money as we had spent, the criticality of keeping your reimbursements were legally important, but probably in order to keep from running out of money, less so. The last time I talked to your squadron commanders in the Management 400 class, almost a year ago now, they told me how much more important they regard you than they may have a year or two or three years ago. Your broken reimbursements equals a broken budget. Your shock rate components are important. If your shock rate components are not accurate, your shock rate is not accurate. If your shock rate is broken, you have to fix the individual components. Like I say, there's the old saying that we used to say when I was a lot younger, garbage in equals garbage out. I also think it's important for us as financial management people to educate our customers on the reimbursements, what they are, how important they are, what they amount to, whether the people are entitled to a discount or not. If they're a fellow DoD agency, they are. I think it's good that we have the shock rate so somebody can say, well, where did you come up with that cost factor? We can lay it right out. We have it there. Here it is. This is why we're charging this much. It's not some fly-by-night number that we just pull out of a hat. Shop rates are a lot of fun. Shop rates are also a big pain, and they're not going away. When we get into next gen, you're going to have to do much of the same kinds of things, though with slightly different processes and slightly different functions. So this is the time to prepare yourself and present yourself for the next gen transition with good shop rates, good components, and such. If you have further questions about shop rates, I would suggest your first place to go is Jackie Leskowicz at the Air Force Institute of Technology. She's the primary resource management faculty. If you would like me to try to address questions you have, please send your questions through on that email address that was on the first slide here, and Zama or Rebecca will be sure that I get it, or they'll send it over to Jackie if they think that's a more accurate way to do that. But don't sit on these things and do nothing. There's folks out there that have been down the road that do understand enough of this. There's a lot of people who understand more of it than I do. If you want to get into the technical parts of it, Jan Collins is the one to do that. She's a little bit hard to get to because of her commitment to next gen. But there is help and there's resources out there. Do not neglect your shop rates. Shop rates are important. Shop rates are part of your reimbursement and part of your budget. So I'm going to stop here. I can't see your questions and ask Rebecca and Zama, are there questions that we need to go with before we close this up?
Hi, Dennis. Thank you. We can continue on for questions until about 3 o'clock since we got a little late start today. I just emailed them to you, Dennis, but can read them off if you need.
I've had cranked up here. Okay. Questions. Okay, here we go. Oh, here. All right, good deal. So were these in any particular order? Okay, can the environmental rates and ACs be used to develop ICD program? I don't know. Heidi, I don't know. We're gonna take your question and take a look at it. Excellent question. Can environmental rates and ACs be used? I'll have to scratch my head and move on from that, but we'll take a look at that. Where do we check to make sure indirect materials is in 61904? You've got a number of documents that are purchasing indirect materials. I go back to my material control folks and make sure that that they have their purchasing documents that are reflecting 61940 if that's what they're doing, or that you have a method to do that. Ron Miller, good question. Wondering if anything about 61904. I've never actually handled 61904. Jan told me about it just recently, but I could talk with my material control people, and we'll shoot that to Jan and see if she's got any information we can get back to you later. Will shop rates flow from next gen to Deems to the interface? I don't know. That's something that Ron, that I had been talking to Jan before I retired. She would get frustrated with me because I'd say, give me information, give me details, and she'd say it hasn't been designed yet. They're still working on it. I'll refer that over, and we'll try to get that as well. Let's see, will the shop rates continue flowing? I just don't know the answer to that. We'll get an answer for you, Ron. Where do we get instructions to troubleshoot our shop rates and ACEs? We had some in the Green Book, which is online in the CE portal. Jackie or I can pull that out and provide to you. Basically, the troubleshooting your shop rate in ACEs, what you're going to have to do is go through each one of those components and say, are the inputs to that accurate? If we have the military labor, are all the military people accounted for in ACEs? Do you have them? Are they at the right grade? Have they been promoted? Are they in the right shop? It's just a fairly detailed kind of process. But if you have questions about that, shoot those at Jackie Leskowitz at AFIT, or shoot them to the training team, and the training team and I will try to come up with a specific answer. Are we running out of time, ladies?
Just a couple minutes. Go ahead and we'll do the rest of the questions.
Okay. Is the interface problem with Dean fixed now? Naomi, I don't know. We'll find you an answer. I'm sitting at the family room at my house, so I'll just have to get somebody, and we will get you an answer on that. Is the interface problem with Dean fixed now? We had to set our rates so the zero transfer wouldn't bottom out our rates last year. I'll find out. I just don't know. Will you need to go in every month to raise the shop rate until you get it to read what it should be? You shouldn't need to go do that. It should be raising it, if it's inaccurate, it should be raising it incrementally over time, and it should correct itself within 12 months. Now, Ron, if you have a shop rate that is so far out of whack and so not reflecting reality, that's when you may have to go back in and rebuild the shop rate from scratch. And that can be done over a period of a few days. What that does is it changes your shop rate in 1 month from whatever it is to whatever it should be. There's advantages to that in that it's now correct, and it's correct very quickly. There's disadvantages to that in that you have a whole bunch of reimbursable customers who are no longer breathing because your shop rate was $12 an hour and now it's 52. It should have always been 52, but they've been getting used to that subsidy, and when you take that away and you take it away quickly, like I say, just shock their system, and they get pretty frantic. So will you need to go in every month and raise the shop rate? You should not. It should be recalculating it and raising it of its own, unless it is really out of whack, and then you rebuild it. And that's what Cindy Bentfield at Ramstein was so good about the rebuilding, and she has done some of that, and is quite good at it. But it is a tedious process. How would you figure out where the problem is with our civilian costs flowing to ACES? Since FY 15 began, only about 10% of the normal civilian costs are being captured. Wow. Take that offline, Jeremy. Take that offline directly to Jackie. And see if you can identify I don't know. There's just too many different things that are flashing through my mind about EIC mismatches in one thing or another. I guess the shop rates. Do we as the Guard have to charge shop rates? Are they active duty only? I don't know that the Guard does do this. I'm not sure how to do it. I don't think the Guard process is the same, and I've got a daughter who's in the Guard, so I'm trying to think out loud. For the shop rates, do we as the Guard have to charge shop rates? If you are working for your reimbursable customers, you should have some method of reimbursement, but are you doing it through a shop rate process through IWIN? And I don't know where the 128 is and where you may be. So if you get in touch with me, whoever it is from the 128, I'll chase your question around and get that for you. I'm not giving you a lot of questions. I'm trying to go quick because I don't have much. We too have frozen shop rates since we came on Dean's October 13th. Would it be better to fix the shop rates in ACES before we move to next gen and let it flow from ACES, or would it be better to wait until we're on next gen and try to get the rates corrected? Let me refer that to Jan Collins and get an answer for you, Delaney. I'm not sure kind of where she is in the processes, and I've not seen Next-Gen IT at all. It's been a big secret and all. So we traditionally have say fix your shop rates now, but then you throw Dean's in the process, and it can make things more difficult for you. So Delaney, I'll talk to Jan Collins and we'll get an answer for you on what her advice is, because she's the one who has specific and first-hand knowledge of all the pieces. That's very quickly running down
all the questions. I know that's probably not very satisfying for some because I just kind of glossed over them, but some of these questions probably would take several minutes to try to answer or even to figure out what the real problem is. But we'll address each one of them individually and get answers back to you. Thanks for spending your time with me. I enjoyed the time that we had. Sorry about the technical difficulties. As I said before, if you have questions and you want to shoot them at me, please do it via the email on the first slide, and I'll be happy to try to answer it for you. Ladies, do you have anything else for us?
Dennis, Roger Beck here. I'm online. I just got off an airplane, so I wasn't there when we started, but thanks for your instruction as always on chop rates, and to the 145 people that were online, many thanks for attending, and we promise to get the answers out to those questions after consultation with those that have the current experience and know kind of the next gen and iWin's interface. So many thanks, Dennis.
Yeah, my pleasure. Lots of good questions.
Yeah, you bet. All right, we're out here, and happy holidays, everyone.